Okay, let's get started. So again, navigate to your project root directory and run the dev server and make sure everything still works. We want to make sure nothing strange happened overnight and that everything is still looking the way we expect. So here's the home page. Here is the page for a specific account so far. And here is the page for a specific post. So one thing I'm going to do right now, just because I forgot yesterday, so I should have taken care of this, is when you go to the page for a specific account, these images do not link to the post page. So you can't really navigate to a post without knowing its actual code, which is clearly not practical. So let's go ahead and take care of that right away. So open up your code, and this page right here is the index.mustache, right? So let's take a look at this. And here are all the posts, right? So here, this image tag right here are these respective images. So let's go ahead and make that an anchor tag. And embed the image inside that anchor tag. For now, I'm just going to make it hashtag, the address hashtag. Let's reload. Okay, so now these are anchor tags. Now let's get these images going to the actual post. So here, this should actually be, the username / code, right? That's really what it should be. So we need these two pieces of data inside the data key passed off in this route right here. So this guy right here, excuse me, this route. So this route right here has the username in the parameters. Let's see. Going back to the actual call, it also has the user key, which has a username object. So we really want that. So let's go ahead and grab that. So we have the user key with the username object. And for now, I'm just going to put in some random string for the code. Okay, it's hard to see, but you see on the lower left corner, you'll see the URL. I'm actually pointing to it with my finger, which is pointless right now. But you'll see that this says 14th Street Y, so that means the user key was successfully passed off. So then if I do ny post, again on the lower left corner, all the way in the bottom, you'll see that the username was successfully passed off to the URL. So that's been taken care of, that's good. And then here, I think it's just code. Let's take a look at it again. So here is the media nodes array, and then that's what we're looping through inside this loop right here. See media.nodes. So media.nodes is, each one of these is what we're looping through, and it's just simply code. So let's go ahead and pass that off like that, and that should take care of that. So let's confirm. So I'm reloading the page, and then look at the URL this time. It shows the username and the code, same as, well, I clicked on it, but here, same as this. So now these link to the actual specific page that we created for each image post. So that's good. Obviously, that's easier to navigate than actually knowing the codes. So, all right, so that's taken care of. Let's go back to the page we were working on last night, which is this one right here, and let's finish out the content. So this is done. This is done. That will be the post page. So here's where we left off. I think I embedded too many rows here, to be honest. I think here we can take that post container and this inner row right here, we can just remove that. Oops, sorry. We can just remove this entire inner row like that. You guys see that? And then we can just do that instead, because by default, this should occupy the entire column width anyway. So if I reload that, you'll see no visual difference. So that's really that I was embedding too much. So this is a cleaner way to organize that. So I think that's easier to keep track of. So now what we want to do is, this is the post container right here. Right, that's the post container div. What we want to do is split that up into columns and grids, or at least one row and column and grid, so that we can have the left side be the image and the right side be the text content. So here inside the post container, we want to create a row. And then inside here, let's do 6 and 6 for now. Let's just cut it in half. And then we grab the image and insert it on the left half. And it should look pretty much the same. Yeah, but it's actually evenly split in half. Yes, they can. So here, Stephen, these would be call MD1s, or just call ones. That's, you can do that too for 12 columns, as in do the 4 columns in the div representing full. Yeah, actually, yeah, Stephen, that's pretty much what I'm doing right here. So yeah, so here I created a row with the call MD8, right? And that's 2/3 of a full row, right? But then inside that, I created another row, and then with cutting that in half. You see that? So you can do that indefinitely. That's called nested rows. It's giving you, a lot of flexibility to carve up the screen into whatever ratios you want. So yeah, actually, that's a technique I'm using right here, right now, as a matter of fact. So this row consists of 12 columns within this column, which is only using 8 of the outer ones. So it's kind of like an inception of columns and grids and rows. So you don't want to get carried away with that. I don't really get much deeper than nesting 2 rows at a time, which is what I'm doing right here. But you can do that forever. And the math equates. So I guess what you're asking is the math consistent across all the rows that you nest? And the answer to that is yes. It'll always be 12, no matter how many rows you nest. So okay, so then here, let's do a p tag for text. And let's see how that looks. Okay, so here it is. We got the image spilling over a little bit. That's probably from a style issue, so let's take care of that. So let's go to the head tag, and we have a post container image. Max width is 400 pixels. Let's make that 100%, because 400 pixels is probably exceeding the value of the column. So there we go. That's what we're looking for. So now that looks more evenly laid out, so that's good. So let's go back to the main account page. Let's try a couple more. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, good. So now we have a good foundation upon which we can build out the UI for the post page. So that's good. By the way, anyone else who's watching this, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. The whole idea behind this YouTube Live is to create some sort of interaction. So if you have any questions, or if anything wasn't clear, or if you'd like me to repeat something, please just throw it in the chat room, because I'm trying to create more of a live classroom style environment inside this. Yes, Stephen, everything's going to be uploaded, and everything goes on my YouTube channel pretty much immediately after I record anyway. So yeah, if you miss anything, feel free to just watch it after the fact. But like I was saying, if you have any questions or anything like that, just throw it up in this chat window so I can answer it right away. Otherwise, this YouTube live is basically just a de facto recording anyway, and it's kind of silly. So just go ahead and throw your questions in the chat window. Okay, so let's see now. We want to get this content here. Well, let's reload this. Showing up like this content here. Looks like it's more of an, I did 6 and 6. Looks like it's more of an 8 and 4 column and grid. So let's see how that looks. All right. It's closer. It's not exact, but whatever. Maybe even 7 and 5. I have a sort of a tendency to do always even numbers, but there's no reason why you couldn't do odd numbers. Okay, we're gonna have to just go with that for now. We can spend too much time on this. So within this call 5, I'm going to create another div and then put that p tag inside the div like so, and then create some padding around this guy. So maybe 16px for now. Okay, and then let's see here. Top, right, bottom, and then left. Good, because there was already some padding on the left, so I just wanted to even that out a little bit. Even 16 might be a bit short. Let's try 20. Try 24. Okay, that's good enough. And then let's see here. If we go back to the route that is servicing this current page, that would be this route right here. Let's see here. We grab the post from the array, and then we assign it to the selected post variable over here on line 64. If it's not found, we throw an error, and then we pass in the selected post into the template. So the selected post is one element of the media.nodes array, right? So then here, if we highlight one of those, so here is one element of the media.nodes array. This is all the data that's currently passed through, right? Which is all the data that's pertinent to the specific post, right? However, what's missing is the data that's relevant to the specific user. And don't forget, we did make a request for this entire API call, so we can actually just grab the user, the entire user key, and then pass that through. But instead, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to parse out certain pieces because we don't need all of it. We just need the icon and the username, and that's it. We're not going to do this follow button. So the icon and the username is all we really need. So let's go ahead and parse that guy out. So here, let's see, inside the selected post data key, we want to assign a new key called the user, which is an empty JSON object for now. And then we're going to grab the user right here, like that. And then we're going to do the username. So here, we're just passing off the username, and that's it. So we're taking the user key, and we're just going to pass off the username, and that is all. So for now, let's just stick with that. Let's not worry about the other parts quite yet. Let's just make sure that this worked. So now our data object, selected post, has another key called the user, which contains one key called the username, right? And that's because we decided only to pass off that one key. So here we can do now user.username, hopefully. Sure thing, Stephen. Let's see here. Cool, and there it is, it worked. So now if I go to another account, and there it is. All right, so that's taken care of. And then let's get the icon passed off as well. So if we go back to the actual raw API, the original, let's see here. Profile pic URL. Let's call that guy the icon. So we go back here, and inside the user object that we're deciding what to pass off, right? So this is up to our discretion. We do icon, and then that would be profile pic URL right there. So like that. Okay, and let's make sure that that's passed off. Of course, that's an image, so we want to make an image tag out of it. Cool, there it is. So now let's go back here. Let's do a little bit of cleanup. This is a little sloppy. You see how I'm doing response.body.user 3 times. That's poor form, so we should just do user. And just do that instead. All right, cool. So now our user object has only the 2 pieces that we want, that we need actually. And I believe that's going to be it. Icon, username, some comments. And yeah, we're not going to do all this commenting today. We're not going to, because that would require access to the actual Instagram, OAuth API, which that's going to be way too much. But we're just going to set up this basic UI. But from a user standpoint, this is all we need. All right, so now let's actually set up the actual appearance. So here is what we have so far. I'm going to go back to the New York Post example. Okay, excuse me. Let's take a look at this guy. "40 pixels by 40 pixels. All right, so that's the image size we're going with here. So style, width, 40px. Hey, fantastic. How's it going? Hopefully you didn't miss too much. Okay, cool. So now that's a little bit more consistent size-wise. So let's go ahead and make that border radius 50% so that it's a perfect circle. All right, this is clearly a strong tag or a bold tag, so that's simple enough. Let's take care of that right now. Obviously, there's some margin there, so we'll do a margin right on the image. So there we are, margin right. Looks to be about 16. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think I overshot there. It's probably closer to 12. Okay. And then there is a HR tag down here, so let's take care of that right away. And that should be outside the P tag. So right here is a good spot for that. And there it is. Okay, great. So now our UI is starting to take some shape. Like I was saying yesterday, let's not develop the bad habit of doing too much inline styling, right? So we have our styling established. So let's go ahead and start creating the CSS class for this. So let's call this post detail. Grab that style and then store this over into the head tag. Post detail. Post detail, and then throw in the padding that we assigned before into there. And then once we reload, there should be no difference. It should be the same thing. So that's good. And then let's see here. We have the image, all these image style properties. Let's get that over into the CSS as well. So here we have post detail. We want to do post detail img, and then throw in those properties. And then make sure it still looks good. Cool. All right. These would be comments. I got to be careful which images I pick now. I forgot about this. All right, so let's see. Okay, so this open API that we're using right here, by the way, I want to be clear, we're using what's called an undocumented API that Instagram just supports. This isn't really the official API. It's just something that's there for sort of convenience, right? It's not, we're not using any kind of real API authentication or API keys or anything like that. So the reason I'm pointing that out is because this is not like an officially supported API by Instagram per se. So that means they can change it whenever they want. They can deprecate things. They can just change the schemas and stuff like that. So you need to be aware that that might happen. In fact, with regard to this particular API, that did happen about 3 or 4 months ago. They changed the endpoints. We're using this unofficial API because it's just so convenient rather than go through all the OAuth authentication, getting the access token and all that crap. So this is more just a matter of convenience. So that's why some of the data that we need might not be immediately available, unfortunately. So if you want to go much further into this, like be able to follow and be able to post a comment or like it or something like that, or bookmark it, then you are going to need to use the official API. And I'll probably do more tutorials on things like that down the road because it is an important skill. Like for example, last night for one of my clients, I had to hook up the MailChimp API to his website. So here's the website I'm working on for him. And what he wanted was a newsletter support. So here he wanted this to go to his MailChimp API mailing lists, and which required API access tokens and things like that. And that's what I did last night. So these are important skills, and I'll probably do a separate tutorial just on that. But this tutorial is more just for beginners. So I needed a quick and simple source of data, and that's what this is all about. If you want to try experiment with other like very simple APIs like this, Reddit does one that's pretty easy. So here is I'm a big fantasy basketball player. So here, if you click on a Reddit post, and then at the end of the URL, you just do .json. It's basically an API. It'll just give you the data in API form. So this is essentially the same thing that Instagram does with their content. So it's a quick and dirty way just to get some data in raw JSON form, and it makes it convenient to create sort of client-side projects like we're doing right here. So that's an important thing to point out. So just be aware of that. So here we don't have. Holy jeez, some of these comments I got to be careful with. Let's see here. Let me try to find something a little bit more innocuous. Let's see. So here, we don't have all the data that we need. Specifically the comments, right? We don't have all the comments, right? So instead, what I'm going to do here is just load the caption, and that's it, because we haven't done that yet. And that data we do have, that's right here. Caption. right? So there's probably a follow-up API call. Not probably. There's almost certainly a follow-up API call you can make for comments, but that probably requires the authenticated API. So we're not going to worry about that today. So here we have the caption. So inside here, create another p tag and just load the caption. So that would be simply the caption tag. Okay, and here it is. You know, I'm going to go back to the YMCA because some of this content is a little bit exactly family friendly. So let's try this instead. All right, in this case right here, I'm going to apply a border on the image because it's a white icon against a white background. That doesn't exactly create a good contrast. So let's go back to the head tag, and that's the image, and that is border 1px solid and a bunch of EDs. And there it is. Okay. One thing we can do is load the number of comments and number of likes. So let's do that down here. 3,200 likes, and let's just put in our own number of comments. So let's create another HR tag over here to create some visual separation. So there it is. And then let's see here. Let's do span likes. And that is inside the likes key, which is an entire JSON object, which has a count property. So let's put that in a strong tag. So let's do a strong. That would be the likes key and the count property. And don't forget that little space right there. And let's see how that looks. Okay. And then let's do the comments. Same idea, comments, right? So it's a comments key, which is a JSON object, which has a count property. So comments, and then comments right there. Okay. Maybe it'll look better on the same line. Let's get rid of this blind break right here and see how it looks. And then maybe what we can do is inside this span right here, or better yet, let's do another span right here, span, and then with the vertical pipe, and then we'll do style, and then margin left 16px, margin right 16px. All right, it'll do for now. Okay, not bad. I'm going to pull this content to the right. I'm being super nitpicky right now. Just, I don't know, just sort of freestyling, trying some things out, see how things look. So let's see. I put all that inside of a div tag, and then we want to put that, give that div tag a text align to the right, and see how that looks. Okay, not bad. I think that looks pretty good. Hopefully you agree. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up for this page right now. What we're going to do next is clean up, right? So from a UI standpoint, let's just pretend we're done for now. Obviously, feel free to make more changes down the road, but what we definitely want to do is some cleanup. We have our partials properly organized. We have our templates properly structured, but we left some code behind inside this index route. That's duplicate code, right? So remember what I said before, don't repeat yourself. Well, we're doing that here. That's no good. So let's go ahead and strip out some of this duplicate code. Like for example, this Instagram API call, we're making that call basically twice. But the callback itself, we're not doing the same thing. But the actual API call, we are. So we're going to strip this out, this API call, into its own function, into a utility class, a utility library, like somebody had suggested on the first session. So let's go ahead and do that because that's certainly better architecture. Normally, these HTTP requests should happen in their own library or their own class. So let's go ahead and set that up. So I'm going to create in the root directory. I'm going to create a new directory called utils. So there it is right there. Let's cd into it. And let's create an index file. And then let's also create an HTTP file. So here's our utils directory right now. Open up the index. Do it this way, const HTTP. Okay, so we're going to import the HTTP from the HTTP file, and then we're just going to export it. Module exports. Okay, so we're doing this first, just so I don't forget. Very easy to forget. Oh, wow. Let's see. Do you have tips on what I can do getting leverage to my jobs? I thought about moving. Yeah, fantastic. I'll post some videos on this. In fact, I'm actually already doing that, so that's a good segue. If you look up this guide to freelancing, right here, guide to freelancing, there's going to be some more content about what you're asking, like how to find jobs and how to find leads and things like that, how to get started essentially. But you should watch videos 1 and 2 because it's aimed at people who are just getting started like you. So you should definitely start with these 2. I'm going to post video 3 on Sunday, 3 and 4 on Sunday, and the whole thing should be about 6 videos. So we're almost halfway there. So okay, going back to here, we have so far this in the index file, and then if you open up the HTTP, there's nothing here because we didn't create anything yet. So we're gonna basically use this file to run the Superagent API calls for us. So with that being said, we obviously need Superagent. So here, this file that we're working on right now is essentially a conduit to Superagent. It's basically just going to proxy the Superagent, functions. But so the question then is, well, why are we even doing that then? Like, why don't we just use Superagent directly like we did here, right? Well, The reason is because Superagent, we may decide down the road that Superagent is not our preferred library. And we might want to use something else like Axios or just plain old Fetch or something. It's just some other library, right? What you want to do is then not have to change all this code, but just change the code inside your abstraction so that you don't have to rewrite all this, like, all this other code everywhere else. And that's the idea behind this. So that's why we're doing this right now. And then we're going to do a GET request, which obviously needs a URL and a query params, which can be null. Now, what we're going to do is wrap this inside of what's called a promise. If you don't know what a promise is, just say something in the chat window. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume you know what a promise is. So we're going to use a promise to wrap these requests. So what we need to do is install a promise library. I'm going to use Bluebird. Okay, so we're going to install Bluebird, and then let's import that here. Now we have the promise library, and this guy right here is going to return a promise. So let's do that right now. And the promise takes an argument, which a function argument, which is a resolve and reject. Okay, and then inside here is where Superagent does its thing, right? So we want to go back to our index route and then grab a sample, the Superagent request from the original, our first endpoint, and we can just copy and paste that for now. Okay, now obviously it's not Instagram API, right? That's going to be URL, and then we pass in the query directly into here like that, and then here is where we use our promise resolve and reject. So this is the error block. So here we want to reject the promise, and then that's it. And then here we want to resolve it. This is the success block, resolve, and then response body. And we only want to resolve the body because that's the actual payload. This is the data that the user cares about. So we want to just resolve with that, and that's it. So now we can use this HTTP library to make the request instead of directly referencing Superagent. So right here, I'm going to run the dev server. So I forget who was asking this on the first session, but somebody was bringing up this point, whether or not we should make this abstraction right away. And to be clear, that's what I would normally do, is use this abstraction right away. But I already have files and libraries that I built, over the years that I would just literally just reuse those. So all this code I wouldn't do from scratch every single time. That seems kind of silly. But that's why I didn't do it on the first video, because it immediately gets to a little bit more intermediate concepts. So we're kind of touching on slightly more intermediate concepts like promise libraries and things like that. So I didn't want to get to that right away. It's more about building from the bottom up. But let's go ahead and now use this. So we want to import the utils. So that would be in here. Okay. Now the utils folder has an HTTP property, right? So we can use that. And the HTTP library has a get command, which takes the URL and the query parameters if we decide to use any. So here, inside this username, instead of all of this Superagent stuff, we can get rid of that for now and try the utils, HTTP, and then get, and then the Instagram API. And then let's just pass in null for the query right now. And then this returned a promise. So then we can do the promise chain, which is this, with the catch block right here. And here is your success and failure callbacks. So we already have those set to go, right? We can just do this for the failure callback. We can just copy and paste it essentially. And then inside the success callback, we can just render the data directly, the data like that. Now remember, inside the actual HTTP library, we parsed out the body already, so we don't have to do it again here. In fact, it'll crash if we try to do that. So we don't want to do it twice. Otherwise, we'll be doing response.body.body, and that's not going to work. So don't make that mistake. It's very easy to do. So let's try it again. I'm going to relaunch the server. Okay, let's see here. Oh, everything still worked. Great. So hopefully it's still working on your end. And then let's go ahead and get rid of this now. So the Superagent call here has now been completely abstracted away. Right? So notice inside this block, the word Superagent doesn't even show up. That's the goal. We want to completely abstract it away into this library right here, so that if we ever decide to, maybe Superagent one day gets deprecated. Maybe it's not even up to us, right? Like maybe one day the library gets completely deprecated and you've got to use a different library altogether. That happens from time to time. It actually happened a lot more in iOS. When I was doing iOS programming, it seemed to be a more common occurrence. But it's one of those things you start to appreciate more and more once entire library is stripped out from under you, and you have to sort of scramble and find another solution right away. So yeah, it's one of those unfortunate realities of programming you have to sort of be ready for. So now here we can do the same thing, right? So we can do here is the Superagent call in the individual post endpoint. So we want to do utils HTTP, and it's another get, and then it's the same endpoint. We pass in null, and then we do the same promise sequence. Okay, let's handle the error first because that's pretty easy. We can just copy and paste that. Okay, and then inside the success, this is a little bit more nuanced, right? So let's just go one line at a time, 2 lines at a time. Let's just do these two first. So here, remember what I said before, the response.body is already parsed out into the data callback. So we just want to do data here, right? And then that should be the same for posts. And then here, let's go through that loop, and then let's I forgot this selected post right here, so be careful, make sure you have that right there. And then here is where we cover for the possibility that the selected post is not found. Now in reality, we don't want to do this anymore. We want to throw an error. So we want to do throw new error, where the message is the argument on the instantiation. And then by doing that, it'll immediately go from here down to this block right here, and then the error will be thrown like that. This is a more consistent way of handling the error rather than just rendering the template directly. So this is better architecture. You want the catch block to handle the entire scenario. Okay. And then here is the full success block. So the final success block. So here we do that. Okay. And that should work. Always love when I say stuff like that, because of course it should work. It's supposed to work, but that's why we're doing this. So let's see what happens. All right, so it did work. Okay, good. Now we can get rid of this Superagent call right there. And now we can just rely on the HTTP abstraction each time. And that's considered a better way of handling that. Okay, so hopefully you got that working on your end. We can just remove Superagent, the import entirely from here, which is sort of the goal. That's what we want to do. So we want to do that. Okay, so now structurally speaking, this is starting to look a little bit better. This is a little bit more well organized. So I just want to make sure everything still works. Okay, sounds good. And then the last thing, excuse me, the last thing we're going to do is take the CSS from here and abstract it into its own file, which is what somebody else was pointing out, I think, yesterday. So that certainly should be what happens. So if you look at the public directory, we have a CSS folder already with a Bootstrap already built in. So that's by default. You get Bootstrap automatically in the Turbo scaffold. So we want to create another CSS inside that directory. So we do cd public CSS. And then we want to create a, let's call it style.css. And then we open up the head partial. And we grab all the contents of the style tag, just copy it and paste it into here. And this will be our CSS file, right? So now we can take this style tag right here, remove all of that, and just put in another direct link like that. And that's certainly better architecture. So let's go ahead and run that to make sure it works properly. So Turbo Dev Server. Cool, everything still looks good here. And looks good here. Let's take a look at the source code just to make sure that we are doing the same thing. Good, everything looks accurate. Okay, and then I'm going to do a quick deploy, so you'll see why in a second. Okay, so here is the staging link, and I'm going to put the staging link right there and make sure we're seeing the same thing, which we do. Excellent. So now if you look at the actual source code here, you'll see that we're referencing the CSS files like that. But here's an important point. If you click on this, look at where it ultimately resolves. It ultimately resolves to that entire URL. And everything before /CSS, this right here, that URL base is what's called the CDN, a Content Distribution Network. Basically what Turbo does is it automatically takes your static assets and puts it behind the CDN. I built it to do that. And the CDN in particular is Amazon's CDN CloudFront. So basically, I set up a global CDN for all Turbo projects, which automatically gets leveraged inside the static assets directory, which has to be public. So basically, another way of putting it is that anything you put in the public directory will go behind the CDN. As a developer, you want to take advantage of that. I mean, you basically have a free CDN, so you want to use that. It alleviates the demand on you to set up your own private CDN, which can be kind of a hassle. So what you want to do is you want to leverage the CDN directly in your code. So you go back to the head tag, and instead of what's called this relative path, you don't want the relative path, you want the entire CDN path like that. So that's why I deployed, so you can get the CDN path. So here is the other one. So here's the other full CDN path for our custom style CSS. So what we want to do is leverage that as well. Okay. Now you may notice again we're repeating ourselves. You see how this URL is the same on both CDNs, right? So what we want to do is go to our env, and there already is a Turbo CDN key. So we want to grab everything up to here. Hopefully you can see that. Copy all the way up to where it says public, and then that is going to be our CDN link. And then we want to use the Turbo CDN environment variable to reference that. So we go here. We go to our routes and then our index. And then we can use the environment variables in here. So inside the data key, inside the home path request, we can do cdn process.env turbo cdn. I believe that's the variable. Yep. Okay. Now we want to pass that off in all of our data objects. So here, data cdn process env turbo cdn. Yeah, this is a little sloppy. Really, we should have done this earlier, but all the same. So now we have access to the CDN, the actual global CDN inside the templating engine. So what we want to do is we want to just do CDN like that. Like that, because in reality, in most projects, you're going to be referencing the CDN a handful of times, not just once or twice. So you want to have a sort of a global variable for that. So let's make sure that that worked. Turbo dev server. So localhost. And if I look at the source code now, you'll see that this is a full reference to the CDN. And this is considered much better architecture. It speeds up the performance of your website because you don't want to go through the actual server to render static files. Those are basically just regular static files. So you want to go right to the CDN for that. You don't have to worry about that for the images because well, this is from Instagram anyway, but yeah, we'll do it in a separate project. I'll show you how the images work on Turbo, and that's basically the same thing. It takes care of the CDN stuff for you. Let's see here. And then if we deploy, I just want to make sure it works on deployment one last time. And that should pretty much be a wrap for this series. All right, the deployment is up. Let's go ahead and check it on the staging environment. Okay, here it is, and then let's look at the actual source code again, and now we're referencing the CDN. Don't worry about these sort of hex codes, it'll work. So if you click on it, it'll go right to the CDN. So cool, that's it. So another thing worth pointing out is that you may have noticed that we set the environment variable here, right? And then the question is, well, how are we sure that it works over on staging? Well, it does, because whatever you deploy on Turbo, it picks up the environment variables and then resets those on the staging environment. So if you go to your actual Turbo dashboard and click on the project, yeah, here it is, and click on configuration, down here you'll see the environment variables, and look at the CDN. This is actually the same as what we had set inside the code itself. So you see that? So on deployment, what happens is that the environment variables are picked up and then reset on your staging environment. So you don't have to worry about doing it twice, essentially. Obviously, you can make one set for one and another if you want to. That's fine too. But you don't have to remember whatever you set here in your local source will affect what shows up here. Okay, so keep that in mind. Yeah, and that's going to be pretty much it for this session, this series. So thanks for watching. I'm going to do the next one starting on, I think I'm going to do it on Monday. Whenever I confirm, I'll send everyone an email. But I'm going to try and do at least one of these a week. Actually, I'm definitely going to do one a week, but I'm going to try and shoot for 2 a week. So I got to figure out when I can fit in the second one. But yep, hopefully you guys were able to follow. As always, this video will be on YouTube in about a half hour, and all the code and all that stuff will be on the actual website. So yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. I appreciate it, and let me know if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions for future topics. So thanks a lot, and I guess I'll see you next week.